Good morning, folks, and thanks for coming. I just want to correct one minor point. I've had 4 businesses. This is my 5th. And really, I mean, that's where it all starts, really, is this business is an attempt to build on what I've learned from the last 4 businesses, really. In all those businesses, I've had a role in business development. Couple of technology businesses, couple of training and consultancy businesses. I've always been involved in business development. What I'm trying to do with this business is use that knowledge, what I've learned over the last 20, 30 years or whatever it is, really to help people, promote their business, sell their business in the most effective way. Really not have to make all the mistakes that I've made over the years, because I've made a lot. So anyway, so just to cut to the chase. So when I decided to start this business, Frank, actually, who I think is here, said to me, "Paul, you're obviously good at selling, but you're not known as a salesperson. So you should perhaps write a book." So when he first suggested that, I rejected the idea because I thought, I don't fancy the idea of writing a book, and I'm not a particularly good writer either. However, I thought about it a bit and then realised, as I often do with Frank's comments, it was a very sensible thing to do. So I decided I would write this book. And I'm halfway through. I've done the research now. So I've interviewed 20 odd entrepreneurs about how they approach the sales process, because I wanted to focus on how entrepreneurs sell specifically, because obviously you can't really be a successful entrepreneur unless you can sell to a greater or lesser extent. So that's where my focus has been, partly because it reflects my experience as an entrepreneur as well. I haven't written the book yet. I suspect the book won't be that great because I'm not a great writer, although I can write, but I've really enjoyed the research and I've learned loads of really useful stuff. Just to let you know, I've interviewed about 20 entrepreneurs. There's a little bit of bias in there towards solutions rather than products, but the entrepreneurs I've interviewed come from a really broad range of industries and sort of types of business and so on. One other thing I just want to make at the start is that one of the things that was really interesting is, although I learned lots of stuff, quite a few of the entrepreneurs said to me, "I'll tell you about how I do this, but I don't want you to put it in the book," because obviously that's their kind of secret sauce, if you like. So that's rather unfortunate for you guys, because I can't share some of those things. However, what I would say is that it brings me to a really important point, and that point is that competitive advantage is always based on knowledge that you have that other people don't do. I mean, you might turn that knowledge into a clever bit of technology or whatever, but the source of competitive advantage is usually related to knowledge that you have that other people don't. And in service businesses particularly, it's often about not what you do, i.e. I'm a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, it's how you do it. That's where you get your competitive advantage from. And sales, having a clever method for selling, or a very effective way of selling, is a really good way to develop a competitive advantage if you can figure out how to do it more successfully than other people can. So that I just want to make that point about competitive advantage and the role that sales plays in competitive advantage, or in developing competitive advantage, because it's been a common theme through the interviews. So let me just come back to these entrepreneurs then. So I started interviewing these entrepreneurs. I'm really grateful they gave me a lot of their time. One of the main things that came across right really from the get-go was that these guys are really good problem solvers. And I think that reflects entrepreneurs generally. I mean, it's one of the reasons I like working with entrepreneurs, is they're great problem solvers. They've usually got a really interesting take on how they're going to do something. But what's interesting about it is that that's really their take on the sales process, is that they simply approached it as a problem-solving exercise and said, okay, I've got this problem, I've got this product, it does this thing, it does it in this way, I need to get it to this market because I think it will benefit them, etc., etc. And this is how I'm going to do that. And they figured out, mainly using trial and error, how to get their product to market and get it into the hands of users and to make those sales. And that kind of problem-solving approach, which is, you can learn problem-solving skills. There's no black art there, if you like. But it reflects also their mindset. And I was completely struck as I spoke to people how confident they were about their product, and more importantly, how persistent they were. And I think those two things are related. That confidence in the value of their product to their particular client group is the thing that made them persistent, is that they persist in the face of quite difficult challenges sometimes. But it's that confidence in the value of what they did for their clients, that enable them to persist and push through the problem. So that's the first thing, is the kind of the problem-solving mindset and the importance of confidence and persistence. The other thing that was really interesting about them is that they'd all developed, if you like, a custom-built sales process. And the reason that's important is, I mean, lots of the books, the textbooks on sales will tell you that you can sell anything in the same way. And actually, my experience of talking to entrepreneurs is that that's not the case. They built custom designed processes. They had common features, obviously, but it was about making a system that worked to get their product into the hands of their target customers. And they designed it purposely for doing that. So it wasn't a generic system. It was a system that was tailor-made to work for them. And again, to come back to this issue about competitive advantage, that's really important, because it's this thing about how you do things and it being different to other people. So that's the first point. The second point, though, is that if you haven't got a system, if you haven't got a process against which you can benchmark your performance, how do you improve? You've got to have a process where you can say, okay, I didn't do that bit particularly well, I can do it better by doing X, Y, or Z, for example. And what was really interesting was that they had these custom-built processes, but they were also, and this is, again, it's a thing that gave them an edge, is that their ability to sell as a business, their capability, was constantly improving. Because they had a method, they could test themselves against it. They could check themselves against it. They could review themselves against it. They could say, this bit's working, that bit's not working. I need to devote time and energy to getting that bit to work better, or whatever. So it's not just that they learned to sell, it's that they developed a way to continually improve their sales process. And that was, I was really struck by how important that was in terms of creating a competitive edge for people. It gave people an edge that perhaps they wouldn't have had under any other circumstances. So in terms of the process, those are the kind of key things I learned, the kind of mindset and the process steps and the importance of that. In terms of the specific things that they did, I won't get into the kind of minutiae of that, but some other things really struck me. So the first thing was that they had a really deep understanding of their customer groups. So when I talked to them and asked them about why what they did was important to their customers, etc., they had really interesting insights. Quite unusual insights, I felt, into what they were doing for customers and why it mattered to those customers. So that insight, that sense of empathy with their customers, that the problems that the problems that their customers faced, etc. Again, it's because they really understood that their customers better than other businesses. That again gave them another competitive edge. So what you're seeing here is lots of small things that are cumulatively creating quite a significant competitive edge, which I think is the reason they were able to grow, actually, because they did lots of things in different ways to other people, and that cumulatively gave them a competitive edge. The other thing about the deep insights to their customers is that it enabled them to do some other things really well. So first of all, because they knew exactly what buttons to press, what things really mattered to their customers, they could develop an offer that was tailored to if you press exactly the right buttons. So it was often really welcomed by customers, because it was tailor-designed, tailor-built, tailor-made to meet their specific requirements. So that obviously is that is very important for people, because they want something that works for them. The other thing that they did around that, so they created this tailored offer that was very, specific about meeting their needs, but also they wrapped that in a really interesting story. And I was struck by how some of the businesses created a very attractive story that, so it wasn't just saying, oh, these are the benefits of my approach and this is how it will help you. They packaged that in a story that was really attractive and engaging to listen to when they spoke about it. And I mean, my take on it, and it perhaps reflects my, I'm not a great storyteller, actually, but I was really struck by how they used the storytelling tool as a wraparound for their offer. And I think, having sort of thought about this since doing the research, I've realized that storytelling is quite an underutilized approach, as a sales tool. And actually, it's quite an easy thing to develop if you think carefully about how you do it. I mean, there are some tools and techniques you can develop, but wrapping your tailored offer in a really attractive story, again, gives you a little bit of an edge. So it's this cumulative effects of these little things that are starting to give them an edge. So just a few more things that emerged. So the other thing that really struck me was that they had a real sense of ambition for their customers. They really wanted their customers to succeed. So the way they selected, not in every example, but in most examples, they selected their target customers on the basis that these were the customers that would benefit most from their product. And I mean, there's an obvious advantage to that. But the other thing it did is it creates this sense of trust that, that people didn't feel they were. I mean, I spoke to a couple of their customers, not every customer group, but a lot of customers, and they said, yeah, well, because they'd made the effort for me, I felt I could trust them. The other thing that it reflects that issue about trust is that people, I mean, one of them said to me, I listen really carefully to what my customers say they want help with. There was this sense of curiosity. They were curious about their customers. And again, the ambition to help customers combined with the kind of general curiosity about the needs and wants of those customers had the effect of communicating trust. And, if you think about it, trust, if you don't have trust, you're not going to buy anything. I mean, would you buy a big ticket item or anything really from a brand that you don't trust or a business that you don't trust? Well, you wouldn't, would you? It'd be daft. So one of the things that they did was that focus on helping their customers be successful and generally being curious about how to help those businesses, not just selling them something, created this sense of trust. And my reflection on that as I stand back is that really sales is the process of building up trust. And one tip, if you want a practical tip to come out of today, is I would say to people, ask yourself this question. What are you doing to create trust for your potential clients? Because if you don't build up that trust, they're not going to buy anything from you. So that's a sort of really underlying sort of issue there, that issue about trust. Lots of people will tell you that's important. There's no rocket science about that. But what I hadn't realized is how important, I think. Some other very practical things that people did. One entrepreneur said to me, I'm really careful about choosing the right customers. She ran a holiday cottage recruitment business or agency. And so she had homeowners that were renting out their cottages as one group of customers and people that want to go on holiday as another group of customers. And she matched them, really. That was what her business was about. And she talked about the importance of making sure that she had the right homeowners that would make sure their properties were attractive and properly cleaned and all the rest of it, so that the holidaymakers had a fantastic experience. But also getting holidaymakers that weren't going to trash the properties. And she made this really interesting point. If I choose the wrong customers, that does huge amounts of damage. It costs time and energy. It can really, damage your reputation. And the thing that struck me about that is that, again, it's this issue about focusing on getting the right customers enhances this notion of building up trust, that you want to do the right thing for your customers. And again, it adds, it's this cumulative effect of creating powerful winning relationships with customers that are going to see you through their longer term. Other practical things. The other thing that really struck me, and it relates to this thing about choosing your right customers, is that unlike most sales approaches, which are to do with trying to qualify whether you're an early step in the process is to qualify whether the lead is likely to lead to an outcome. What I saw with the people I interviewed was the opposite. They looked to disqualify people. Their first issue was, if this person, they recognized that most people aren't going to want what they sell. So what they wanted to do was identify really early whether this was a likely customer or not. And if it wasn't, they would disqualify them and move on. And what that did was it allowed them to focus their energies on people that were likely to want their product. And that was really great, because what it did is it cut down this kind of tension that you see sometimes when salespeople are constantly pitching and trying to pressurize people into buying. And again, because they didn't do that, because they disqualified really early in the process, And, you know, the risk there is that you lose some potential customers because you get that wrong. But again, people didn't feel that they were pushy. And it adds value to this thing about creating a trust-based relationship. Some other really little things that are important. So one of the things that a number of them told me was, and this reflects my own experience actually as an entrepreneur, is that they were really careful not to be too clever. So they didn't try to pitch innovation. That wasn't their selling pitch. And if you think about that, one person explained it to me really clearly. They said, look, that innovation equals change for the customer. If you want them to buy an innovative product or an innovative service, what that means is they've got to change. And change equals risk. And risk means rejection. People don't like risk. They don't want to buy stuff that they think might go wrong. I mean, you know, you think about the famous IBM saying, you know, nobody got fired for buying IBM. You know, innovation doesn't sell. People talk a lot about it, but from a sales perspective, people actually don't like it. So although some of them had really innovative products actually and approaches, they didn't pitch it on the basis of, buy this, it's really innovative. That was not how they approached it. They did the opposite, actually. They made it appear a really safe bet, even though it was actually quite a clever, interesting, you know, novel approach. That wasn't how they pitched it. So again, minor points, but really quite significant. And again, it's this thing about the customer feeling they can trust you, that you're not going to take risks with, you know, their situation. Two other minor things just before I finish. So the other thing that really struck me was that they sold with love first. And it's rather like, let me see if I can explain this. It's rather like selling a suit. If I was a tailor selling a suit, am I more likely to be successful if I try and sell the suit on the basis that it's fantastic fabric and it's made in Hong Kong and it's, you know, it's beautifully cut? Or am I likely to be successful if I can communicate to the client that when you wear that suit, you look fantastic? I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. If you think about it, is to communicate the kind of the kind of, you know, the emotion that's involved in the product as a starting point. But what we often see people doing is endlessly talking about features and benefits. Actually, what these guys did was they sold with love first, and then they followed up with kind of logic, if you like. A minor point, but it made a lot of difference in terms of their ability to persuade people. And then finally, the other thing that, again, really no rocket science here, but really important. What I saw from all of the entrepreneurs pretty much that I spoke to was that when they went into a sales conversation, when they went into a sales meeting, they were really well prepared. I mean, not just prepared in the sense of, oh, I've spent 5 minutes thinking about it, but they had thoroughly prepared. They knew their stuff. They knew their customers. They had worked out a tailored approach for, you know, influencing and persuading that customer. You know, they aimed specifically. They worked hard to make sure they pressed the right buttons and, you know, sold it in the right way. And again, it's a minor point, but you can have a fantastic product. But if you don't really take the time and the effort to make your customers feel that you're working for them, it's not surprising that people get rejected. So on that note, I hope that's been helpful. I think I'm coming up to the end of the 20 minutes. You're nodding at me, Kathy, which is a good thing. I hope that's been helpful. If
you are. Yeah, Paul, that was absolutely brilliant. There were a couple of questions in there, but it was great to see everyone was answering them. You've got 1 minute, Paul, and one of the questions was, why do you think storytelling is so underutilized?
It's this thing that you see people talking about features and benefits. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I saw were people wrapping that into a story. And it struck me because I'm not very good at it. So, it was a real learning point for me, is that, yes, you need to know the features and benefits. And yes, you need to know the positive impact that the product will have on the client. All that, of course, you need to know that. But it's how you communicate that. And if you can knit that into a story, I mean, that just makes all the difference. And I mean, it's something I'm working on getting better at the moment, because it's so powerful, because most people don't do it. Again, it's this thing about competitive advantage comes from doing stuff that other people don't do. It's not necessarily that it's difficult, it's that people don't do it.